Nick has created for himself and opportunities that have been there and he's passed them up, but created so many other things in the same way, and is very competent in many areas of his life, like music and in bands and records and skateboards and dancing and engineering and even singing in the band. Has 3 girls who are triplets who are now 12. And you have a mind that works, a special mind that is creative, that has the ability to show people what possibilities are like.
Thank you.
It's true, really, because you are creative. You don't think about what could go wrong. You just have a go at it and create it and work it out.
Mm-hmm.
And with, you know, your neurodiversity that you live with is even an asset for you in life.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely so.
Yeah.
Most definitely so.
Yeah. How do you see that? Do your girls have any inkling or understanding of their dad and how he thinks and how he works, and what do they say when they ask you to do something and say, Dad, you need to go right and you turn left, or that's just sort of something?
Yeah.
What is it? How do they process?
Yeah, so part of that is it's very interesting. So when my girls were a little bitty, right? They were maybe 4, yeah, about 4 years old, right? And this is when I knew something was up with my kids, right? I give all 3 of them, because experiments are fun, right? So I give all 3 of them a word search, right? On the back of a menu, kids menu, or at a restaurant, back of a kid menu, word search, right? And I pay attention to how each girl thinks when they're doing it, right? And for example, Genevieve looks at it and she looks down and she's like, okay, cool. Word 1, let's look for word 1. Okay, word 1, cool, found word 1. Word 2, look for word 2. Okay, cool, found word 2. So on and so forth. Vera goes, word 1. Word 1, I can't find word 1. Okay, cool. Word 2, all right, cool. Let's look for word 2. Okay, cool. There's word 2. Word 3, I can't find that word. Word 4, can't find that one. Word 5. Okay, cool. I'll come back to word 5, and I'll come back to 2 and 4 and 3 later, right? Lindy looks at it and she goes, and then looks at me. She's like, Dad? I'm like, yeah. She's like, there's too many letters. There's too many words. I don't want to. You want to play tic-tac-toe, Dad? Because this is I want to play tic-tac-toe instead. I don't like word searches. And I'm like, really, sweetie pea? And she's like, yeah, I don't like word searches. And I'm like, okay, interesting. Let's take a look at that real quick. And I was like, so, and this is around 2021, right? And so, or no, this is actually before this. This is actually before this. But actually, no, it's not. That wasn't around 2021, was it? Or was it 2020? Regardless, I kind of had a good idea about how things were kind of working at that moment in time, before I did my deep middle dive, but I was like basically kind of there. And so I started looking at my girls. I'm like, all right, cool. Lindy, let's take a look at this. And she's like, okay. I was like, so, fun fact for you. And she's like, what? I was like, your mind works kind of exactly like Daddy's mind. And she was like, oh, no way. Really? And I'm like, and it's really, really cool. She's like, oh, it's like a special thing that we share, right? And she was like, that's the coolest thing ever, Dad. And I'm like, it is the coolest thing ever, sweetie pea. Want me to teach you a trick? And she's like, I want to learn a trick, definitely, right? So I teach you tricks all the time. I was like, here's a trick, baby girl. And she's like, what's the trick? I was like, look at all the words at the same time. And she was like, what? I'm like, look at all the words at the same time. Find all 12 words at the same time. And she was like, I can do that? I'm like, of course you can. You can do anything you want to. And she was like, okay. And then so she looked at it and she was like, oh my gosh. And within a couple of minutes, she finished the entire word search faster than her 2 sisters did. And she was like, oh my gosh, I love word searches. They're so cool. I'm like, aren't they? And now look for the bonus words. And she's like, bonus words? I'm like, yeah, the words that are on the list, find more bonus words. And she's like, and so she looked for all the bonus words, right? Because you do bonus words. And then at the time, Vera was like, whoa, how did Lindy finish so quickly? And I was like, Vera, what words do you have left? She's like, oh, I have 4, 3, 6, and 12 left. And I'm like, okay, find those 4 at the same time. And she's like, oh, I can do that. I'm like, of course you can. She's like, okay, found all 4 of them, no problem. Because she was looking for all 4 of them at the same time, right? And then Genevieve was like, how's it going, Genevieve? She's like, I just finished number 12. And I'm like, awesome, very, very cool, right? Very, very literal in everything she does. Very, very literal, but she's very, very smart, but very, very literal in everything she does, right? And so I was like, huh, cool, interesting, right? So ADHD in guys, mostly in guys, not all the time, but mostly in guys, is outwardly presented. Like we're like, whoa, we're like wired all the time, like crazy. So they thought ADHD was like kind of like a guy thing, and girls really kind of don't get ADHD. That's what they thought like a long, long, long time ago, right? But the reason ADD, the term ADD doesn't exist anymore, and it's just ADHD, is because the H doesn't refer to your body's hyperactivity, it refers to your mind's hyperactivity, because there are 2 different types of ADHD, inwardly presented and outwardly presented, right? So Lindy, outwardly presented all the time, right? Vera, inwardly presented. Her mind's going 10,000 miles a minute, but she's not going to let it show, right? As most girls would, because that's the kind of ADHD that presents itself mostly in girls, which is very interesting, right? So I was like, huh, which makes sense because they're identical twins, 2 sides of the same coin. One internal, one outer, one internal, one external makes logical sense to me because that forms one. You see what I'm saying? So I was like, oh, that's okay, that's cool. And then I looked at Genevieve and was like, huh, well, not so much on her, but she does a lot of other things that other neurodivergents do as well, right? So it's like she has a pinch of the autism stuff going on and a pinch of the other neurodiversity things going on too, right? Which is very interesting. So I was like, huh. So at that point in time, I started tailoring conversations to the way their brain works, right? And that was really cool for me because communication is the most important thing in the entire universe, not the world, the universe.
Yep.
So
I'll have to agree.
incredibly important.
Yep.
So
It's
incredibly
lost somewhere in translation with so many people. Conversation, it needs to come back.
100%.
Yeah, it's lost a lot of it.
Conversation with intention, even more so.
Yeah.
And so I started working on my girls, right? And ever since my girls could basically talk, I've been teaching them logic-based thought patterns, right? Like Occam's razor, for example, right? Like the easiest solution is often the most simple solution. And, teaching them we don't let our anger and sadness take control because it's really easy for sadness to take control because sadness is sticky and it sticks to things, right? And it just grows and grows and grows and grows. And if you don't check it early, it'll turn into a big monster, right? And they're like, oh, okay. And, things like, we want to make sure we take a look at things and go from one step to the other. And we have controlled risks. Everything's a risk. But if you do it the right way, for example, like walking on the back of the couch, if their mom saw that, she would flip her lid, right? But I'm like, look, girls, you have to have 3 points of contact. And they're like, 3 points of contact? I was like, yeah, your hands got to be on the ceiling and two feet down there on the couch. And they're like, okay. And I was like, why? 3 points of contact. I was like, how many sides does a triangle have? And they're like, 3. And I was like, is it easy to push over a triangle? They're like, no. I was like, so if you have 3 points of contact, it's probably not easy to fall, is it? And they're like, okay. So, and then logic-based thought, right? So for example, like instead of saying, don't jump off of that, like most parents will go, don't jump off of that. Why? Because I said so. Okay, cool. I wouldn't say that. I would go, okay, don't jump off of that. And they're like, why? And I was like, do me a favor. They're like, here, come here. And they're like 2 years old, 3 years old at this time, right? And I'm like, don't jump off of this. And they're like, why not? And even 4 and 5 years old. I'm like, okay, see the ground right there? They're like, yeah. I was like, okay, now watch this. Now I want you to do everything that I do. And they're like, okay. And I would hit the ground with my palm of my hand. I'm like, I'm going to give the ground a high five. And they're like, okay. I was like, first I'm going to give you a high five. I give them a high five. I'm like, high five, right? They're like, yeah, high five. They're like, cool. Now give the ground a high five. They're like, how? And I'm like, yeah. Like, you're going to hit it hard, right? They're like, yeah, I hit it hard. It hurt. I'm like, uh-huh. Now imagine if that was your head. Would that feel good? And they're like, oh no, that would not feel good at all. And I'm like, that's why I asked you not to jump off of that, because when you jump off of that, one thing's going to move and you're not going to move. And you might hit your head pretty hard. And if you do, it's going to feel like that. And they're like, oh, now I understand. Yeah, I'm not going to jump off that. I'm like, thank you. That's a good idea. Yeah. And so, because kids don't understand yes and no, but they understand why, and they understand cause and effect, which is a big deal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's really interesting when it can explain that to a child.
Mhm.
Then if they make the decision and they know what the consequence is, they'll either do it or they won't do it, regardless.
Indeed.
And it's their
Very true.
choice. Their choice.
Very true. Very,
Yeah.
very true.
Yeah.
Very, very
It's
true.
interesting, isn't it? That
Mhm.
when you have children, you're always saying, don't do this, you'll hurt yourself, or don't cry, or don't. And the first thing they want to do is do it because they've been told not to. But they don't
Right.
they don't understand the consequence of what can happen if they do it, because they
Mhm.
don't see any danger in it.
Mhm.
We see the danger, but they don't see the
Mhm.
danger. But when you
Exactly.
explain it like you explain it to your girls, it makes sense.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, and I didn't realize it then, but I do realize it now. I have 3 neurodivergent kids. I'm a neurodivergent dad. My ex is neurotypical. Her brain does not work at all anywhere close to where ours works. So she doesn't even get it at all.
That was my next question. Is she or
Mhm.
isn't she? No.
Her whole
So
family's neurotypical. Nuts.
how does she work with the girls then?
Very much like a typical adult would. Don't do this if you do this, then spank you. If you do this, then timeout. If you do this, then da 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 da, and then so on and so forth. This is just what I know from what they tell me. Because once again, she divorced me when the kids were 6 months old. So, and it's weird. She's got a weird something going on upstairs where it's like, Anyway, I digress. But anyway, yeah. So I haven't been around a lot to see her parenting. So I just know from what the girls tell me, and the girls are like, look, I did this and mom did this. And I'm like, well, because she doesn't understand, like, baby girl, her brain doesn't work the same as ours do. She's like, they're like, yeah, I know. And I'm like, so instead of this, try this. And they're like, okay. And they do it and they don't get in trouble next time, you know?
Mm.
Um, and then, ever since I figured that stuff out and when they were in elementary school, right? I was like, okay, cool. So I was like, sweetie P, how did class go today? And they're like, oh, it went okay. And I was like, so what did you not understand? And they're like, oh, well, when she talked about this, I just didn't even know what to do. And I'm like, so try this, baby girl, try this. Rub your fingers together for me. They're like, uh-huh. I was like, cool. Now watch that TV behind me. They're like, uh-huh. I was like, now listen to what I'm saying. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Now repeat back what I said. And they'd be able to repeat it back 100%. And I'm like, so do you know what we just did there? And they're like, what? I was like, so here's the deal. So the deal is, your brain gets bored really easy. And they're like, it does? And I'm like, yeah, you got to give it more things to do. Because if you just listen to one person, that's the most boring thing in the universe. And they're like, yes. And I'm like, so give it a whole bunch of things to do and then tell it what you're looking at is the most important thing. And because you're giving it so many more things to do, there's a very high likelihood you're going to remember what the person in front of you is saying. And they're like, oh. And I was like, and sometimes you can even play a game and read their lips. They're like, no. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's fun. They're like, okay, okay. And sometimes you can even read their eyebrows. They're like, read their eyebrows? I'm like, yeah. So you can see what they're thinking before they say it, and then see if you can guess it. They're like, oh, I like that one too. I like that one too. And just like I was like, you play mini games, like gamify life, right? They're like, gamify life is the idea, right? It's like, but you play mini games, and those mini games keep your brain entertained. So while you're doing it, it makes more sense. And they're like, oh, I like that. That's so cool. I like that. And I'm like, then, talk to them a couple of days later. I was like, how'd it go? They're like, it went so much better than that. I'm like, cool. That works.
Yeah.
It's really,
So
really cool. It's really special.
you give them things to think about so they can concentrate when someone's actually speaking, because you get bored
Mhm.
very quickly because there's no real, what is it? No real stimulation going on there because there's one
Mhm.
person talking about something that's
Mhm.
not much fun to listen to, because your brain's going 100 miles an hour at the same time.
Mhm.
Yeah, makes sense.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Super fun. Super fun. And then one of my girls has a thing with anxiety as well, and so She was, you know, for example, like in the mind's of the fun thing, right? So she had, you know, there was a section where her stomach didn't feel very good and she you needed to vomit, but hated to vomit. Like, for example, like I was like, I was the same way when I was your age, and she would just scream and scream and scream and scream and scream so much she would freak herself out. I carried her to the bathroom one time while she was in the middle of this like freak out episode, basically. Her mother would do nothing to curb this, for example, right? Whereas I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, something's clearly not right here. So let's figure this out. So as I'm carrying her to the bathroom, she works herself into such a state of hype and panic, she passes out, wakes up in front of the toilet, vomits. And I'm like, okay, sweetie Pete, I'm going to fix this. And they're like, she's like, what? I'm like, cool. I'm going to teach you how to breathe in squares. And she's like, how do you breathe in squares? And I'm like, this is how you breathe in squares. You breathe in for 5 seconds, hold it for 5 seconds, exhale for 5 seconds, hold it for 5 seconds, and rinse and repeat. And what that does, and so I did it with her, and I did it like raise your arm, lower your arm, because in Kung Fu, that's how you raise and lower. You raise your energy and like compress your chi to like focus it, right? And I was like, so it's the same kind of idea, right? But you're gonna raise and lower your arm. So she has a visual aid and a physical touch and a mental acuity at the same time, right? So you go up and down. And I showed her how to do that. I was like, so what we're doing, baby girls, we're reintroducing more oxygen into your bloodstream, right? When we're doing that, your heart's going to have to pump less because right now your heart's pumping super fast. And when your heart pumps super fast, it puts a neurological response straight to your brain, to the fear section of your brain that says, fear, fight or flight. I have to go, 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 go. Nothing's going on. You're creating a false sense of fear, right? So if you bring more oxygen into your blood, that's going to slow your heart rate down. When you slow your heart rate down, that message is going to go up to your head, and then you can calm down, relax, realize what you're doing, and you can go on about your life. And so I taught her how to do that, and that was really cool and really special because she went out of her freak out mode, right? And so then anytime she went back into it, I had her do the breathing exercise again. She was fine. So it's pretty cool.
That's fantastic to be able to teach you girls to do those sort of things, which they'll remember forever, and very useful skills to have. Now we have to go because the show's finished, but thank you, Nick. It's been absolutely fabulous having this conversation with you and learning about your life and how you learn to control it and do the things that you're passionate about, and then teach your girls that as well. It's been wonderful. Thank
you so much.
My pleasure. We could talk for hours.
Indeed. Indeed.